Bruchim haboim, welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph, starting with the Mishnah on the bottom, Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah, Shisha Dvarim Osu Anshe Yerichoi. There were 6 things that the people of Yerichoi, they were noiheg to do. Al Shloisha Michu B'Yodam, Al Shloisha Lo Michu B'Yodam. On 3 of them, the Chachamim protested, and on 3 they did not protest. But Al Kaparim, the Gemara will explain later on, all 6 were Loi B'Ritzoin Chachamim. Ve'elu hein shelo michu b'yodam. Now list the Mishnah those 3 things that the Chacham did not protest. Markivin dekolim kol hayon. They grafted the branches. Now we're talking about grafting that was in itself mutter, permissible, because we're talking about their own tree, and the girl will explain the method of grafting over here. But al kol panim, since they did this, and it was considered to be a malacha on Erev Pesach, so that was a problem, because we learned before that in regards to doing malacha on Erev Pesach koydem chatzois, it depends on the minhag hamokor. But after chatzois, mi'ikar hadin, everybody agrees it's also to do malacha. And they did this malacha on Erev Pesach even after chatzois. The next on the list is v'korchin es shema. It means that they wrapped shema. There's different explanations. Amongst them is they did not say Baruch Shem Kevod Malchusoi Le'olam Voed. V'koitzim v'goichin lifnei oimer. They harvested and they stacked grain before the Korban Omer was brought on the 16th of Nisan, the 2nd day of Pesach. All 3 of these things, again, were not Ritzoin Chachamim, but they did not protest. Ve'elu shemichu biyadam. The next 3 are a list of those things that the Chacham did, yes, protest against. The first one being Matirin Gamziois Shel Hektesh. The trees that were sanctified, that were consecrated, they used the branches subsequently, after it grew, these branches, and they were matir such branches, saying that it's not considered to be a problem of me'ilah. On top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, Ve'oichlin mitachas hanishorim b'Shabbos. They ate the fruit that fell underneath the tree on Shabbos. The Gemara will explain the reasons why this is problematic. V'noisnin peya liyerek, and peya, which is normally given a corner of the field produce to grains to the anim, here they gave yerek. Yerek is vegetables. And since the Chacham said that vegetable is not considered to be proper peya, and therefore when the aniyim take it as peya, the rules when it comes to peya is not to have to take meiser. So the aniyim will then take the peya, the yerek, thinking that it's true peya. They'll eat it without being meisering, without taking meiser from it, whereby they'll be eating tevel. So michu b'yadam chacham, the Chachamim, they protested against all 3 of these different minhagim. The Gemara now brings a brayso that is really listed as a separate Mishnah in the Mishnayos, as follows. Tonu Rabbanon, Shisha Dvarim Osa Chizkiah HaMelech. The great Chizkiah HaMelech, the tzaddik Chizkiah, he did 6 things. Al Shloisha Hoidu Loi V'al Shloisha Lo Hoidu Loi. On 3 of them, the Chachamim, they agreed with. On 3, however, they did not agree with. But it doesn't say that they protested. And the first 3 are listed as follows. These are the ones that they agreed with. Al Shlosha, that they were hoidu, was the first one, Girer Atzomois Aviv Al Mito Shel Chavolim V'hoiduloi. His father Achaz, the king, was a Rasha. He was Oived Avodah Zarah, his Machtias Harabim, to be Oived Avodah Zarah. Chizkiah wanted to bring an atonement for his father, and therefore, instead of giving him a burial with a coffin befitting a king, he put him on chavolim, and chavolim, a mita shel chavolim, was a very poor type of person, a layman's type of mita, as well as instead of carrying the mita, he dragged it on the ground. The Chachamim agreed with this behavior in order to then give his father kapara. It should be a form of making a Kiddush Hashem. Ki says, Nachash HaNechoshes, Chizkiah HaMelech took the Nachash HaNechoshes, The Nachas HaNechoshes was that in the Midbar, when Klal Yisrael were speaking against Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent a plague of Nechoshim to bite those in Klal Yisrael who were speaking improperly. These snakes that were poisonous caused those to die, and people became very, very sick, and if were about to die, they're on the verge of dying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu then instructed Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw that they were doing tshuva, to then make a Nachash HaNechoshes, whereby Moshe Rabbeinu, he erected a copper snake on the very high top of a pole, whereby Klal Yisrael who were bitten would look up towards Shamayim and mishabed their lave to Shamayim. So it says over here that Kites Nechash HaNechoshes, he smashed it, he crushed it. V'hoiduloi, and the Chachamim agreed with what he did. Why was this something to agree with? Because they began using this as a form of avodah zarah. They saw that it had power, as if it was the thing that was healing people. And therefore, the Chacham agreed that he should destroy it, and he did indeed crush it. Gonaz Sefer Refuos v'hoiduloi. Chizkiah HaMelech took the Sefer Refuos that some say was written by Shlomo HaMelech, Olav HaShalom, and this gave a quick remedy to any illness that a person might have faced. Why was this considered commendable? After all, to have a healing way that is going to be so effective. But the reason is because people began looking at these healing sefer, the Sefer Refuos, and instead of being nichna HaKadosh Baruch Hu and doing tshuva, they quickly sought out a remedy to become better. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends an illness in order to awaken a person so that he should be nichna, submissive, and do tshuva. And therefore, v'hoiduloi, the Chacham agreed together with Chizkiah for hiding, for burying the Sefer Refuos. The next is a list of the three that they did not admit to, they did not agree with. The first one is Kitzet Delosoy Shel Heichal V'Shigron LaMelech Ashur, the king Sancheriv, the king of Ashur. So he levied a big tax, a very hefty tax, on Chizkiah HaMelech, whereby Chizkiah, he took money out from all of the Oitzoros, as well as from the different kesef from the Beis HaMikdash, but he still fell short. So then he took off the doors, the golden doors of the Beis HaMikdash, to then pay those taxes to Sancheriv. The Chacham were not in agreement with his behavior, because they said HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have sent him the means to then pay off Sancheriv, and he didn't have the proper bitachon in Hashem, and therefore it was a bizoyon to the Beis HaMikdash to use the golden doors for payment. Sosam be Gichon ha'elyon, he took the waters of Gichon, the upper waters. This is referring to where Sancheriv was going to lay siege on Yushalayim. So Chizkiah, he stopped the water source so they wouldn't have water to drink, the king and his soldiers. However, this was something that the Chacham were not in agreement. V'loi hoiduloi. Why? Because the pasuk says explicitly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu declares, "V'ganoisi al ha'ir azois," I will protect this city, referring to Yushalayim. Lohoshia, to save it. L'ma'ani, l'ma'an David avdi, for my sake and the sake of David HaMelech, my servant. And therefore, Chizkiah should have bitachon in Hashem, and he didn't have to then be sasam, the May Gichon ha'elyon. The third thing that the Chacham did not agree with, and that is Iber Nisan ben Nisan. One is to take the month of Nisan and make it the Chodesh, the Rosh of the Chodashim. Like it says, Chodesh Hazeh, Rosh will be the first of the Chodashim, of the months. And when there's a need to the me'aber, the months, in other words, to add a second Adar every so often, every few years, in order to then maintain the calendar, to then be not only a lunar calendar, but also be considered to be together with this solar calendar. For example, when it says in Pesach, it's Chag HaOviv, to be a Chag that is in the springtime, then the calendar has to be adjusted. Therefore, in order to then make a leap year, it has to be that a second Adar is added before the end of Adar and the beginning of Nisan. Since over here, the way the Lord explains in another place, it was the 30th day of Adar, whereby witnesses could have still come in and gave testimony to the new moon, making that day Rosh Chodesh Nisan, then it's considered to be an infraction of adding another month at that point. It's too late. HaChodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chadoshim, referring to Nisan. V'lo acher, not a different month. And therefore, v'lo hodu lo, the Chum did not agree with Chizkiah Melech in this regard. The Gemara now quotes the first of the three that are listed in the Mishnah that the Anshe Yerichoi did, and the Chachamim, of course, were not in agreement with, but they did not protest. Markivin de kolin kolayim. What does it mean? Hechi avde. What did they do that they grafted? Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Yehuda, Maisi Aso Dora. They brought a fresh type of myrtle, of a hadas, that was fresh and moist. The shichra de dafna, the juice of the fruit from the dafna tree. The kimcha de sare de rami memona de loy cholfi alea arboin yamin. They took flour, which was from the barley flour, placed in a kli not more than 40 days, and then they boiled it. They boiled it together, and they took this concoction. They injected it inside the dekel tree. So this is what the grafting that was referring to, a form of malacha that was done on Erev Pesach, even after Chatzos. They're called dekoi ba'arba amos didei iloi avdi lehachi tzavi le'alter. The Gemara points out, if any of the other trees in the vicinity of Daled Amos did not get the same type of treatment, in other words, they didn't put the injection of this concoction in those trees, then immediately it will dry up. That's one explanation of what it means that they did this malacha on Erev Pesach, even after Chatzos. The Gemara then says another explanation which is more closer to the inyan of grafting. Rav Acha ber Rava Amar, Manche kufra dichra lenukvasa. They took the stems, the branches of the nekev, the nekeva that did not produce fruit, and they put the male counterpart that did produce fruit, and they took those branches of the male and they put in the crevices of the female, where they grafted it. So again, this was a malacha that was done, not that there was a problem of grafting, because it was the same tree, but here we're talking about a malacha that was done on Erev Pesach, even after Chatzos. The karchine shema, they wrapped the shema. What does that mean? Hechi avdei, what did they do? Says the Gemara, Amar Yehuda, Oymrim, they said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, v'lo hayu mafsikin. But they did not make a hefsek between Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim and the tzivui of V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. Rava Omar mafsikin hayu. They did make a hefsek between Shema and V'ahavta. Ela shayu oymrim hayom al levavecha. The mashma hayom al levavecha v'lo mocha al levavecha. In the ensuing psukim it says, V'ahiu advayim ha'ila she'anuchi mitzav hayom al levavecha. So, if you read it all together quickly, Mitzavcha Hayom Al Levavecha is mashma, that tzivui was for them that time, today, but not for future generations. And therefore, it was without the Chachamim's Rotzon that they did this. They wrapped, so to speak, the Kriya Shema together. Toda Rabban, the Gemara brings a Braisa. Keitzad Hayu Karchin Shema, how did they wrap the Shema? Oymim Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad v'lo hayu mafsikin. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir explains the way we said earlier in the first explanation, that they said Kriya Shema, Kabbalas Al Malchus Shamayim, but they said V'ahavta immediately without a hefsek in between. Rabbi Yehuda Omer mafsikin hayu. Rabbi Yehuda argues and said they did make a hefsek. Elo shelo hayu oymim Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam Voed. But they did not add the phrase of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam Voed. Ask the Gemara, Va'anan my time aminalei. we ourselves who do say Baruch Shem in between Shema and V'ahavta, what is the reason why we do so? After all, it's not printed in the Torah. In the Torah, it states Shema and it states V'ahavta immediately afterwards. Says the Gemara, Kedidarish Rabbi Shimon Lakish. The Omar Rabbi Shimon Lakish. The Yikra Yaakov Elbana Vayomer Hayasvu Va'agida Lochem. Yaakov Avinu called his 12 children together, the Shivtei Ka, and he said to gather them together, I want to tell you the following. He wanted to reveal to them the end of times. Bikesh Yaakov legalos labon of Kate Hayamin. V'nistalkem min hashchina. Immediately the Shechina departed. Omar, he thought to himself, why did the Shechina leave? Shema chas v'sholem yesh b'mitasi psul. Perhaps there is amongst my children one that is pasul, somebody who is not complete in his faith, in his emunah. Ki Avram sheyotzim menu Yishmael, like there was a psul that came out from Avram, Yishmael. V'avi Yitzchak sheyotzim menu Esav, or the psul that came out of my father Yitzchak, namely Esav. V'amru loy bonav, the children, the Shivtei Ka, responded to their father Yaakov, and they said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Yisrael was another name for their father Yaakov. Listen, Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. He's the one and only. Nobody can do a single thing other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If He doesn't want it to be done, it will not be done. Either for your success or Chalil, the opposite. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one and only. Amru, Yaakov responded, Amru, they were saying when they said Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Kishem she'ein belibcha ela echad, kach ein belibenu ela echad. Just like in your heart there's only one Hashem, so too in our heart HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one and the only. The Gemara then says, Ba'oisa shah posach Yaakov Avinu v'omar. At that moment Yaakov Avinu responded, Baruch Shem kevod malchusoi la'olam v'ed. Blessed is the name of His glorious kingdom forever and ever. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbanan heichi na'avid. The Rabbanan said, how shall we proceed? How shall we do? By saying Kriya Shema, should we also say Baruch Shem? What's the Gemara's question? As follows. Ne'amru, should we say it? On the one hand, how could we? Lo amru Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu did not say it. Lo ne'amru, if we do not say it, however, how can we not say it? Amru Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu did say it. So the Chachamim made a pshara. We shall say Baruch Shem, but b'chashoy, with a whisper. Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Debei Rabbi Ami, Mashal Abbas Melech Shericha Tziki K'teiro. The Gemara brings a mashal of a princess who smelled a stew that was brewing with spices in it. Im Toimar, if she would say Yeshla. If Taimar, she would say, I would want some to eat because it smells so good, and therefore she has a desire, craving for that meat that's being cooked, then Yeshla Ganai, it would be considered to be a Ganai. It would be something that would be beneath her dignity to request such a thing. On the other hand, Loi Taimar, if she would not say anything, Yeshla Tsar, she would be in pain because she does desire to eat such meat. Her servants then began to give it to her in secrecy. In other words, for Klal Yisrael, on the one hand, not to say, or start with, on the one hand, to say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusoi, that would be something that can be considered to be inappropriate, perhaps, because Moshe Rabbeinu did not say it. On the other hand, not to say it, they would be bitzar because Yaakov Avinu did say it. And therefore, the appropriate response would be a pshara, to say it quietly with a whisper. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Hiskinu sheyu oimrim moisoi b'kol ram, mimnei sh'tarum mois haminim. Subsequently, they made them to say Kriya Shema takana b'kol ram, because of the heretics, the minim, that would then claim that when we're saying Kriya Shema and then saying Baruch Shem, if we did it silently, we're saying what they believe. So therefore, in order to then counteract such a a taina claim, a taruvis. Therefore, we say it out loud. The Gemara says, "U'b'neherda," the lekem, meaning in the city of Neherda, where they're not heretics. Then it states they always said it. There was never a problem. So it says the Gemara, "Ad hashta amrei lebachashai." They said until now, secretly, meaning quietly, to say Baruch Shem Kod Malchus, like the original enactment. Ton Rabban, and the Gemara brings a brayso, which explains a little bit more than what we saw in our Mishnah. Shisha dvarim asu anshe Yerichai. There were 6 things that the people of Yerichai were noheg to do. Shloisha b'ritzon chachamim v'shloisha shaloi b'ritzon chachamim. 3, according to this opinion, were of the ratzon chachamim, and 3 are not. Ve'elu b'ritzon chachamim. The first 3 were the ratzon of the chachamim. Markivin dekolim kol hayoim. They did grafting, as we explained the 2 different explanations above, on Erev Pesach, even after Chatzos. V'korchin eshma, and they wrapped Shema, again, according to the various explanations we gave above. V'koitzin lifnei ha'omer, and they harvested before the omer. Ve'elu shelo b'ritzon chachamim, and the next 3 are a list that is not of the ritzon chachamim. Goichin lifnei ha'omer, they stacked the grain before even the omer was brought. Upartzim protzois beginoiseim upardesoihen lahachil nishar lanim b'shnei b'tzares b'shabbos v'yomim tovim. They broke down the fences of the gardens and the orchards. For when fruit fell, they would feed them to the anim even on Shabbos and Yontif. Umatirin gamziyoi shel hektei shel charuv v'shel shikma. They used the branches that grew from a consecrated tree, of a sycamore tree or of a carob tree. Div Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. So what Rabbi Meir is saying, which is different than we understood and we saw before, is that of the 6 things that the Anshe Yericho did, 3 of them were of the Ratzon of the Chachamim. Only 3 of them were not with the Ratzon of Chachamim. On that, Rabbi Yehuda takes issue. Omar la Rabbi Yehuda, Im b'ritzon chachamim hayu oisin, then you call Adam oisin kain. If indeed these 3 were with the ratzon of the chachamim, then everybody else should have also then performed these acts. Ella, rather, it must be Eilu ve'eilu sheloi b'ritzon chachamim hayu. These and those, meaning all 6 of them, were without the ratzon of the chachamim that they did oisin. Only 3 the Chacham protested. The other 3 did not protest because they said, nevertheless, it's still rochaik, and although we do not agree with this behavior, nonetheless, we're not going to make an outright protest. These are the 3 that did not protest. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Markivin dekolim kol hayoim. They made, again, this type of grafting on Erev Pesach. V'korchin eshma. And they wrapped the Kriya Shema. And they harvested and stacked the grain before the omer itself was harvested and stacked and brought. And the following 3, they did protest. They took the branches of the sycamore and the carob trees that were consecrated, and they used them. Upartzim protzois beganoisehim pardeseim lahachil nishar lanim b'shabbos v'yomim tovim b'shnei b'tzares. They broke down the fences again of the orchards and of the gardens that had trees that fell from them fruit, and they fed those fruit to anim on Shabbos and Yom Tif during the famine years. V'noisnim pe'al liyerek, and they gave as their payah even yerek, even vegetable. Umichu b'yadam chacham. The Chamim protest against these 3 acts. Now the Gemara asked a question on this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Asked the Gemara, "So Rabbi Yehuda kitzira sheloi b'ritzon chachamim hi." Is it so that Rabbi Yehuda will say that the fact that the Anshe Yerichai, they were koitzer the grain in Yerichai before the Korban Omer was brought, before the Korban Omer itself was harvested, that was not with the Ritzon Chachamim? Ask the Gemara. Vehatnan, but the Mishnah states, Anshe Yerichoi, Koitzin Lifnei Oimer B'Ritzon Chachamim, that the Anshe Yericho, they did harvest grain, and although it was done before the Karban Oimer was harvested, it was still with the Ratzon of the Chachamim. Why? Because the area of Yericho is a valley, and it's inferior type of grain, whereby it's not going to be something that's fitting anyways for the Oimer. Whereby, this is an exception to the rule, one can be koitzer grain if it's some such type of inferior grain, if it's before the Oimer. And therefore, it was not only without the protest, but it was with the Ratzon of the Chachamim. So, the Mishnah goes on to say, V'goichin lifnei Oimer shelo b'Ritzon Chachamim. And when it comes to stacking the grain, however, before the Karban Oimer was brought on the second day of Pesach, that was without the Ratzon of the Chachamim, but they did not protest. Al Kapanim, here we're saying that the Mishnah states that the Katsira in Yericho was with the Ratzon of the Chachamim. The Gemara now builds up its question on the Vav Amud Beis, Amud Alpha on the top of Amud Beis. Man shamis lei the Omar Michu v'lo Michu. Who is the one? What is the opinion that says this distinction between whether they protested or they did not protest? Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yehuda, and not Rabbi Meir. It's Rabbi Yehuda. Viktani, and it states koitzim b'ritzon chachamim, that the chachamim they were koitzer. So you see that this Mishnah is indeed Rabbi Yehuda, which seems to then soiser what he said before, because earlier he said that koitzrin, the Anshe Yericho were koitzrin, the grain before the Oimer, was without the Ratzon of the Chachamim. And yet over here, the Mishnah, which is authored by Rabbi Yehuda, says it was with the Ratzon of the Chachamim. Answers the Gemara, according to your reasoning, then Hani Arbo Havu. If you're going to say that this Braisa is accurate, then it states over here 4 things. It puts together the koitzrin together with the goitchin. And therefore, it would be 4 different acts that were against the Ratzon of the Chachamim. So you see that the Braisa is not accurate. Elasami mikan kitzira. Rather, you have to remove from this Braisa kitzira, whereby, indeed, like the Mishnah we just presented now, states that the kitzira that they did that the Anshe Yericho did in Yericho was, yes, with the Ratzon of the Chachamim. And therefore, the other 3 things are without the Ratzon of the Chachamim. And therefore, all 6 of the things that are truly listed, removing Ketzira, those were without the Ratzon of the Chachamim. 3 of them, the Chachamim protested, while 3 of them, they did not protest.